My esteemed friends, how long can one tumble in Mario Kart 64 before being picked up by Lakitu? What does this strange photograph of Lapras imply in Pokemon Snap? And could there be an OG speedrunning connection to the Reckless Ben Lego situation? Yes indeed, these are the pressing questions that one can only ponder at this moment in time, and so we must simply dive in to explore these and other N64 and speedrunning oddities, glitches, and other ponderances. Grab yourself a warm beverage, or cool beverage if you prefer, and here we go.
Here we go!
The deep oddities of Koopa Troopa Beach. So I was browsing this ancient website administered by Mario Kart legend David Wan, aptly named davidwancontech.net. These are truly the ancient texts of Nintendo 64 era gaming, full of glitches and oddities, ranging from the benign and basic to truly strange and esoteric. This entry under Koopa Troopa Beach caught my eye. Stuck in Koopa Troopa's Beach. Sent in by me. I presume that's David writing to his own website. Other people could submit these stories and glitches as well. When you start, go backwards and face towards the mountain between the ramps just before the finish line and jump the mountain and turn a little to the right. And if you were lucky, you would have been stuck in the mountain while turning around and around. You can do the same trick in Choco Mountain, you just have to go jump to the mountain to your right when you start. It doesn't freeze it, you just have to press start and go to quit. Editor's note, from my own experience with this glitch, you don't really get stuck forever, just wait about 30 seconds and an invisible Lakitu will pick you up. This seemed to ring a bell, as niche as it sounds, and pretty quickly I recalled where I'd come across it before. Another ancient legend of the games, Shadowofmyles. Miles is a clip from 2008, but purportedly recorded in 2006, showing this exact scenario. Miles writes further, after 30 seconds of tumbling, the cart picks itself up to avoid a game freeze. And I just find this fascinating because, yeah, there's no Lakitu, just as David Wan described, and the Mario Kart 64 devs must have known well enough to include some kind of failsafe in this scenario where you're stuck in the tumbling animation for 30 seconds or so. And amazingly, Miles has another video of the similar situation taking place on Choco Mountain. So while quite obscure, this Lakitu tumble failsafe is actually a pretty well documented thing. Miles also has a couple of other incredibly fascinating clips from Koopa Troopa Beach. For example, the tunnel glitch, in which we see him initially miss the famous shortcut, only to kinda bounce back in weirdly to the side of the tunnel, yet still finding some solid ground there. After taking in this surreal view, he shrooms back into the tunnel, and the clip ends. Presumably the collision for the tunnel floor was built beyond just the actual tunnel for a bit of leeway, but it makes for quite the strange clip. Further to this, there's another clip called Koopa Troopa Beach Tunnel Floor, in which we see him reverse while in the tunnel, kind of clipping into it while in reverse, eventually falling through into the out-of-bounds water below. You know, maybe the devs just never imagined people would reverse through the tunnel, so it's just an oddity of the way the floor loads in. I genuinely wonder if something will ever be found here even 30 years after the game's release. If, say, the floor is extended in some weird way, and we could find an even better shortcut across the stage. Because as per the Mario Kart 64 time trial community, they don't even consider the tunnel jump a real shortcut, as this cut is intended in the game. You know, their shortcuts are all the more, broken and unintended stuff. And given Koopa Troopa Beach is one of only a few courses with no shortcut, along with Moo Moo Farm and Banshee Boardwalk, it truly makes me ponder in the way only niche YouTube uploads from nearly 20 years ago can make a man ponder. The Lapras Conundrum. Here's an incredible clip from a top Pokemon Snap player, Icy Speedruns, but in order to understand what's going on here and why it's so jarring and shocking, we need to learn a little bit about Lapras in Pokemon Snap, one of my all-round favorite Pokemon. So Lapras is a lovable, sweet Pokemon that I think we would all love to ride around or swim around with, especially in the clear water of something like the Great Lakes. Anyone who swam in Lake Huron or Michigan, or any of them really, can probably relate. Anyways, Lapras is actually the lowest scoring Pokemon among the 63 in the game. Not that this really matters in the context of Pokemon Snap high score attempts, because the competition is relative to the highest score possible per Pokemon, not highest score overall, and in this case the record for Lapras is 3,540 points. The reason Lapras is low scoring is partially because they're quite far away in the sea, so they always produce a small size score. This all takes place on the beach course, of course, and you have to take photographs of the first very distant Lapras towards the start of the course, and a closer Lapras midway through the course, and then finally you get the 3 Laprases towards the end of the course. Now, Lapras was often one of the most troll or kind of difficult Pokemon to photograph in the game because of the randomness at which the background Laprases rise up from the sea, or at least the perceived randomness. In the earlier days of Pokemon Snap high score attempts, you just kinda went through the motions, played it out hundreds of times, and hoped you would get a lucky run where all the Laprases were breaching the surface at the same time. But this eventually changed, and one gamer, Icy Speedruns, really began looking deeply into the game's mechanics. He realized that, like in many other games, a lot of the randomness, or RNG as some call it, could be consistently manipulated with various button presses at various timings, and you can reset the game to reset the RNG from a consistent position, allowing you to do things and push buttons in certain ways to get the desired output on every run, so long as you reset beforehand. Well, Icy really solved Lapras to a good extent, and was able to match the world record set by Ficaterago a few years earlier, a score of 3,540. So did one other gamer, MW, but Icy wanted more, and played more, even using a tool-assisted superplay to prove that 3,570 is possible, a slight improvement. And yes, the terminology there is tool-assisted superplay because of course this is not really a speedrun by any means, and TAS is a good consistent acronym to use in these contexts, so people came up with S for superplay in the context of high scores and other non-speedrun gaming achievements. But anyways, in his attempt to go for such a score, Icy found himself in this situation. I mean, look at these 2 pictures back and forth, which we can easily do toggling an in-game comparison option when selecting your photo. They look like literally identical, at least it's the same frame and same positioning, it's the same photo, certainly of these Laprases. But what's unbelievable is that they scored differently. This is just one of those things that can be so shocking and jarring when going for high scores and world record speedruns, especially in games from this era. Sometimes identical inputs can result in different outcomes, which is just the kind of thing that's nearly impossible to explain in any sensible way. It reminds me of the time the GoldenEye speedrun community did a side-by-side comparison of a Train Agent 104 and 103, and the 104 looked faster than the 103 in the comparison video. And that really blew everyone's minds and kind of made everyone doubt what they were doing, which is maybe something that some people doubt themselves doing anyways when it comes to speedrunning. Either way, these games really do have a sort of mystical quality to them that baffles even the most knowledgeable of gamers. And I think that's part of the great magic of these games and of this era of gaming. Like, what good would it be if everything was the same every single time and everything was perfectly solvable with mathematical formulas and whatnot? It doesn't leave room for the magic of life, as I'll call it. And when I saw this clip from Icy, which he called the Lookalike Lapras, as much as it might have frustrated Icy to see different scores on such a similar photo, it really struck me with the magic that makes us all so truly remarkable. I mean, yeah, like maybe the water is slightly different, kind of barely, but it doesn't explain the differences in scoring we see with both sides on the main Lapras and the other ones. Like, it really just is so unbelievable to see. Now here's a remarkable story that embodies all the things I love about strange childhood memories. You'll see why and how, and it's from someone going by the name Agent Polaris. Goose, I have a story about something weird that happened to me while playing on my Nintendo 64 when I was a kid. It It was at some point in the year of 2000 or 2001. I was playing Kobe Bryant's NBA Courtside in my room with my dad. It was around 8 p.m. I was using the Seattle Sonics and my dad was using the Lakers. We were having fun when suddenly a huge thunderstorm happened. At first we didn't think much of it because such storms are frequent in my country, but the thunderstorm got so strong it caused a blackout. In that moment my dad simply went to sleep, but I was so scared of the storm I couldn't, so I decided to remain awake until the power came back on. Minutes later, I don't know exactly how much later, but it wasn't too long, the lights came back, and because I still couldn't sleep, I decided to play alone for a while. I turned on the console, the game began to load, but when I'm at the screen where you have to select the team you want to play as, not one, but two new teams appeared. I remember their logo was weird, although I don't remember if they had a logo at all. The first team had all his players obscured, like when you have unlocked something in a game, except this team was totally playable. The other team allowed to see the players, but they were weird. Something important is that the players of the team with the obscured players was composed of very weird characters. I can only compare them to those humanoid enemies from Smash Bros. Melee or to the fighting Porygon team. The other mystery team had people that appeared normal but didn't look like any famous basketball player from those times. I've already posted this story twice on Reddit, and both times they've erased my post claiming I was lying or that everything was a fever dream. P.S. I forgot to mention, both mystery teams only appeared that one time and then never again. I wasn't able to use them ever again after I turned off the console that day. This is just such a great story and so fascinating to me because it really harkens to the sort of blend between childhood memory and dream state, with the added cliche of a thunderstorm and the lovely nostalgic feeling of playing a video game with dad. Now, in my estimation, I do think Agent Polaris probably did just dream this, but I don't think that takes away from it at all. What I find so interesting is that there are a few teams that have changed in the National Basketball Association since the year 2000, including the Seattle Supersonics, the team OP was playing, who relocated to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Thunder, thunderstorm, it's almost like too insane. Other relocations include the Vancouver Grizzlies to the Memphis Grizzlies and the Charlotte Hornets to the New Orleans Pelicans. So the story almost further creates this sort of premonition state where OP sort of predicted new teams in the NBA, which sounds obvious, but honestly, I remember back in that era really never knowing or feeling that teams could be relocated or expanded. I remember around this time being like stunned that the NHL added the Nashville Predators and Minnesota Wild. Like, it was just unthinkable to me. But also possibly, Agent Polaris might have retroactively remembered this story after teams expanded, blending back in with the experience of the Power Outage and a possible dream afterwards. In either way, this sort of thing is just such a truly cool thing to ponder because it really doesn't require anything impossible. I mean, like, could the teams even have glitched due to a crooked cartridge or stray bits misfiring after a power surge to the house? I mean, kind of blackened out and weird characters and weird logos and teams does sound like the kind of thing that might have happened due to a crooked cartridge glitch. It's a thunderstorm, maybe they got up quickly and knocked the console a bit, it doesn't sound implausible. Maybe he didn't dream it at all, and maybe this was something he actually experienced. And the fact that such a thing is remembered, and that it's even a possibility that it might be true in some way, even if it's not, it's just such a cool thing to ponder. My esteemed friends once again. I'll call you that once again here to buckle up for this next story. So have you all heard of this Lego scandal? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you all have. It's like the biggest thing in the world for some silly reason, especially here on YouTube. But I actually have some actual unique perspective on it, possibly linking it back to a prominent Nintendo 64 gamer who I've discussed a few times on this channel and on my Speedlore channel. Otherwise I wouldn't even bring this up, it's so far out of my realm of expertise. But yeah, stay with me on this one. let's watch some funny LEGO racer footage and other N64 footage while I explain this story. I'll recap as briefly as possible, because there's another million videos out there, but there are really 5 or 6 parties involved in this story. And, I have zero investment in this. It's all alleged to me. I barely care about the core of the story, only this crazy sort of connection to speedrunning. This is all my own opinion and interpretation. You got it. Here's my poor retelling of this story. So, a father-son pair, the Mansells, had a massive Star Wars LEGO collection, and allegedly or apparently came to an agreement with a woman, Crystal Law, to consign the collection for sale at her franchise location of a store called Bricks and Minifigs. Something I've never heard of and am genuinely not sure if we have Bricks and Minifigs in Canada, and frankly, despite making a video segment about this, I think it's funnier if I don't even Google it to find out, so I'll never know if we have this store in Canada. Allegedly, as the story goes, Crystal Law left her position as the franchisee of the Bricks and Minifigs location for one reason or another, and was replaced by corporate or something by new operators, Joshua Johnson and Brandon Best, which honestly sound like hilarious fake names you make up when pretending to be an alt account online, but hey, whatever. At some point in this all, the collection of the Mansells was lost or unaccounted for, or something else happened to it. I know there's a joke in the precious metals community that they all lose their metals in a boating accident, but it's not the same in this case since the Mansells obviously wanted to sell the LEGO collection. I mean, what a name, wow. Then, a YouTuber, Reckless Ben, got involved, and I'm really realizing how everyone's name in this story sounds fake. Reckless Ben got too reckless. The Mansells wanted to sell. Like, what is going on here? And this touches on where I'm eventually going for this, because a side character in this whole story is a fellow named Ben Gorman, the husband of Crystal Law, the original franchisee who operated the Bricks and Minifigs store at the alleged time of the alleged consignment agreement. Okay, so we're all caught up on where we need to be for where I'm going to chime into this story. So my friends, who is Ben Gorman, you might ask? Well, if you're super keen on my content and have been paying attention for years and years, you will know that Ben Gorman is the name of one of the earliest Perfect Dark speedrun champions, who also went by Paragon X9. He was champion of Perfect Dark at the earliest iterations of the Elite World Rankings back in the years 2000 and 2001, and he was a defining character in the formative years of Perfect Dark speedrunning. He discovered many strategies, including the defection fall through the building trick, and set the first several world records with it. He's truly a legend when it comes to early speedrunning, and frankly, it was stunning and jarring to see the name Ben Gorman come up in this context. I actually had people reaching out to me to ask if it could be the same Ben Gorman. I mean, look, a speedrunner from the year 2000 who was like 16 years old or something at the time, they would now be in their early 40s. They could totally be the husband of the former franchisee of the alleged store location or what have you. So is this the same Ben Gorman? Well, my friends, it is not the case, and here's how I know. Ben Gorman, as it was in the formative Perfect Dark days, was actually a fake name chosen by this speedrunner to maintain some online anonymity. A pretty good call for back in the early 2000s, something that, hey, I guess all of us fools on social media today don't do the same thing. Now, I won't reveal this person's real name here, but for the sake of this all, let's invent another fake name to pretend it's their real name. We'll go with, Johnny Dark, in homage to Joanna Dark from Perfect Dark. So Johnny Dark was the real speedrunner, the real guy who was influential in Perfect Dark, but he went by the pseudonym Ben Gorman and the sort of gamer tag Paragon X9. Now, there are 2 additions to this, and I've seen it come up through the years that Paragon X9 was apparently someone who made music on some old website like an eBombs World or a Newgrounds. But apparently this is also not the same Paragon X9, if that's already confusing enough. And then this Ben Gorman name, well, apparently Johnny Dark borrowed this name from a guy who was once his neighbor. So there is apparently a real Ben Gorman out there. According to a site I found, howmanyofmes.com, there are 145 Ben Gormans in the United States. So the odds are even pretty low that Paragon's neighbor is the same Ben Gorman as the one tangentially involved in the whole LEGO drama. I mean, look, could I investigate this even more? Yeah, sure, but if I've learned anything from my time online, it seems like some cases, situations, and people are better left simply pondering about rather than diving too deeply and getting too personally involved in a case. So I will leave it at that. The Ben Gorman and Perfect Dark connection, or non-connection, to the insane Reckless Ben Bricks and Minifigs controversy of 2026. Truly remarkable. I hope you enjoyed these unusual N64 glitches and stories to ponder. Thanks to the channel members and Patreon supporters for all of your support of my work. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you in the next stream or video.